In a sense, this show, Danse Russe, has everything to do with Stravinsky, and it has nothing to do with Stravinsky. It's a vaudeville show. I mean, we've basically made a 21st century American cartoon version of the backstage story of The Rite of Spring, with these actual historical characters. But basically, it's our own take on the situation from New York, from Philadelphia, 100 years later. So it's a completely different perspective.
It has possibilities. Yes! Calm, fury, and above all, scandal. Scandal!
And I'm not trying to sound like Stravinsky. This is not a pastiche of Stravinsky's work. For one thing, who can compete with Stravinsky? I mean, come on. He's the greatest. So that would be not a great idea from the beginning. So what we're doing here is, since this piece is paired with Reynard in April, in the April premiere, what we've done is taken our cue from Reynard. Stravinsky calls it a burlesque, and so our show is called a vaudeville. And we're basically doing things based on the conventions of vaudeville, British music hall, American musicals, things familiar to us in pop culture, basically.
Tell me something, Pierre. Yes, Igor. What is one Russian? An anarchist. 2 Russians? A chess game. 3 Russians? A revolution. And what is 3 Russians and a Frenchman? A ballet company.
I like to think that Stravinsky himself would have appreciated the spirit of this mixture of high and low art forms. And I see it as kind of an affectionate homage to Stravinsky and his collaborators. I have to say that composing an opera for a composer is the greatest challenge. I mean, there's simply nothing like it. It's not just the scale of the whole thing, it's also the nature of the medium. It's a curious hybrid between music and drama. It's purely speaking, it's neither one nor the other. It's both, and it's a curious combination.
Part 7, the Composer's Workshop.
Damn! 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 What in the name of all that's sacred am I going to do? Well, what I always do. Sharpen pencils, pray to God. Go to work. What do I remember? The sound of spring. For in a moment, a single moment, I felt
reference to The Rite of Spring, and that is this chord here. It's the famous sacre chord, as it's called. And you'll recognize it as one of the most famous passages in 20th century music. In a sense, it's the E equals MC squared of 20th century music. It sort of stands at the foundation of modernism in music.
the whole earth cracking. Yes. Yes. Yes! play, little boy, go and play! Go away!
Mr. Stravinsky, that's a wild note! You're playing wild notes!
Wrong for you, mon petit cher, but right for me!
Well, well,
Igor Fyodorovich.
that chord, interesting. Will it last a very long time?
Until the end, my dear.
Well, well.
In spite of the fact that the librettist comes up with the words, and no matter how strong the source material is or whatever, in the final analysis, the composer in opera is the dramatist. And that's something that I found very difficult to learn in middle age, at the age of 49, essentially a new discipline. Beyond the technique of music composition, which has its own challenges, I had to learn how to be a dramatist. And that's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And to write an opera is, you know, as I said, the greatest challenge. And there's a paradox to consider in opera, and that is that music, of course, is front and center all the time in an opera, but it has to be translucent enough to allow the story and the characters to shine through. And another part of that paradox is that it's the music itself that is bringing the characters to life and bringing the story to life and telling the story at the same time. So this sort of Zen-like paradox, while it's doing all this and while it's front and center, it still has to be somewhat invisible. It has to be not there in a certain sense. It's a very, very strange paradox, and a wonderful one as well. It's a wonderful medium to work in. Among other things, I think working on the letter and also working on Danse Russe has made me a better composer. I think I've improved. And that's true not just in technical terms, but also in terms of my creative universe. It's simply broader and richer than it was before. And it reminds me of something that Jung said about Goethe. He said that it is not Goethe who creates Faust, but rather Faust which creates Goethe. It's the work itself that creates the creator. And that's the way I think about my own music. That is, I feel that in some way it's continually creating me as I go along in life. And it's a great joy. It's a great pleasure.